Marcus Thompson never expected his Tuesday evening walk to turn into a fight for his life. The 4-year-old former Marine sergeant had been living quietly in downtown Phoenix for 2 years, trying to build a normal life after serving 3 tours in Afghanistan. His left leg still carried shrapnel from an IED explosion, and his nights were often interrupted by memories he wished he could forget. That October evening started like any other. Marcus finished his shift at the auto repair shop, where he worked as a mechanic, grabbed a quick dinner at the corner diner, and decided to take his usual route home through the city park. The autumn air was crisp, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the empty pathways. Walking helped calm his mind, and he needed the exercise to keep his injured leg from stiffening up. As he turned the corner near the old fountain, Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold. A woman was screaming for help from the parking lot behind the community center. Without thinking, his military training kicked in. He limped quickly toward the sound, his hand instinctively reaching for a phone to call 911. What he saw made his stomach turn. 3 men had cornered a young woman near her car. She was probably in her early 20s, clutching her purse and keys while backing against the vehicle. One of the attackers was demanding her wallet, while another kept looking around nervously for witnesses. The third man was reaching for her car door, clearly planning to force her inside. Marcus knew he had seconds to act. The woman's terrified eyes met his across the dimly lit parking lot. In that moment, he saw his younger sister Sarah, who was about the same age. Every protective instinct he had developed during his years in the military surged through him. "Hey," Marcus shouted, stepping into the light. "Leave her alone." The 3 attackers turned toward him, and Marcus could see they were all younger and faster than him. His injured leg would slow him down in a fight, but he couldn't just walk away. The woman was trapped, and there was no one else around to help. "Mind your own business, old man," the tallest attacker snarled, pulling something metallic from his jacket. The streetlight caught the edge of a knife blade. Marcus raised his hand slightly, trying to appear non-threatening while positioning himself between the men and the woman. "Look, nobody wants any trouble here. Just take whatever you want from me and let the lady go." But the attackers had other plans. They had been planning this robbery for weeks, watching the parking lot for easy targets. A limping veteran wasn't going to scare them off their biggest score yet. The first attacker lunged at Marcus with the knife, aiming for his chest. Years of combat training saved his life as Marcus twisted away, but the blade still caught him across his left shoulder, tearing through his jacket and into muscle. Pain shot down his arm, but he managed to grab the attacker's wrist and twist until the knife clattered to the asphalt. The second man hit Marcus from the side, sending both of them crashing into a parked car. Marcus felt his ribs crack against the bumper, but he used the momentum to throw his elbow back into his attacker's face. Blood sprayed from the man's broken nose as he stumbled backward. "Run!" Marcus yelled to the woman, who was still frozen by her car. "Get out of here now." But she couldn't move. Terror had locked her muscles, and she could only watch as the third attacker pulled out a gun and pointed it at Marcus. The shot echoed through the empty park like thunder. Marcus felt the bullet tear through his right thigh, spinning him around and dropping him to one knee. His leg, already weakened from his old war injury, couldn't support his weight anymore. Still, he didn't give up. As the gunman approached to finish him off, Marcus rolled toward the dropped knife and came up swinging. The blade caught the shooter across the forearm, making him drop his weapon and cry out in pain. The woman finally broke free from her paralysis and ran toward the street, screaming for help. Her cries echoed off the empty buildings, but the nearest houses were blocks away. The first attacker, recovering from his broken wrist, picked up a tire iron from the ground and swung it at Marcus's head. Marcus ducked, but the metal bar caught him across the back, sending him face first into the concrete. Stars exploded across his vision as blood ran from a gash above his left eye. For a moment, everything went quiet, except for the sound of his own labored breathing. Marcus could taste copper in his mouth and feel warm blood soaking through his clothes. His body was failing him, just like it had in Afghanistan when the bomb went off under his convoy. But he could still hear the woman crying nearby. She had tripped while running and twisted her ankle. The attackers were moving toward her again, and Marcus realized this wasn't over. Summoning strength he didn't know he still had, Marcus pushed himself up from the ground. His vision was blurry, and his left arm hung useless at his side, but he stood between the criminals and their victim one more time. "You want her?" Marcus said, spitting blood onto the asphalt. "You're going to have to go through me first." The attackers looked at each other, surprised that he was still conscious. They had expected him to stay down after the beating they had given him, but Marcus Thompson had survived worse than this in the mountains of Afghanistan, and he wasn't about to let these cowards hurt an innocent person. The longest night of his life was just beginning. The second wave of attacks came faster and more brutal than the first. The three men were angry now, frustrated that their simple robbery had turned into a prolonged fight with a stubborn veteran who refused to stay down. Marcus wiped blood from his eyes and tried to focus on the attackers circling him. His right leg was completely useless now, forcing him to lean against the car for support. Every breath sent sharp pains through his cracked ribs, and his left shoulder burned where the knife had cut deep into muscle and tendon. The tall leader picked up his gun from where he had dropped it. "Should have minded your own business, soldier boy," he growled, raising the weapon toward Marcus's chest. But before he could fire, the woman Marcus had been protecting did something that surprised everyone. Despite her twisted ankle, she had crawled behind another car and found a handful of loose gravel. She hurled the stones at the gunman's head with all her strength. The rocks struck him across the face, making him flinch and fire wild. The bullet shattered the window of the car behind Marcus, showering him with glass. Several pieces cut into his neck and hands, adding new wounds to his growing collection. "Nice try, lady," the second attacker said, limping toward her with his broken nose still bleeding. "Now you're both going to pay for this." Marcus knew he had to end this fight quickly or they would both die. His military training had taught him that sometimes the best defense was an aggressive offense, even when injured. He pushed away from the car and charged at the nearest attacker, ignoring the screaming pain in his leg. The surprise move caught the man off guard. Marcus tackled him around the waist and drove him backward into a concrete pillar. The impact knocked the wind out of both of them, but Marcus used his superior weight to pin the man down and land several hard punches to his face. The third attacker tried to help his friend by kicking Marcus in the ribs. Each blow felt like a hammer strike, but Marcus held on and managed to grab the man's ankle. He twisted hard, hearing something pop as the attacker screamed and fell backward. For a moment, it looked like Marcus might actually win the fight. Two of the attackers were down, and the leader with the gun was still trying to clear his vision from the gravel attack. But Marcus's body was shutting down from blood loss and trauma. His hands were shaking, and his vision kept going dark around the edges. The leader finally wiped the last of the dirt from his eyes and took careful aim at Marcus's back. "Game over, hero," he said quietly. The fourth gunshot of the night echoed through the parking lot. Marcus felt the bullet punch through his lower back, just missing his spine but tearing through his kidney. The force of the impact threw him forward onto his face, and this time, he couldn't get back up. Blood pooled beneath him as he struggled to breathe. Each heartbeat sent more of his life flowing out onto the cold asphalt. In the distance, he could hear sirens finally approaching, but they sounded impossibly far away. The woman was crying again, begging the attackers to leave them alone. She had crawled over to Marcus and was trying to put pressure on his wounds with her jacket. But there were too many injuries and not enough fabric. "Please," she whispered to the men standing over them. "He's dying. Just take whatever you want and go." But the attackers were in too deep now. They had seriously wounded a man and committed multiple felonies. Leaving witnesses alive would put them in prison for the rest of their lives. The leader reloaded his gun and pointed it at the woman's head. "Sorry, sweetheart. Nothing personal." Marcus watched this happen through a haze of pain and approaching unconsciousness. He had failed. After surviving 3 tours of duty in one of the world's most dangerous places, he was going to die in a parking lot in his own hometown. Worse, the woman he had tried to save was going to die too. But as the gunman's finger tightened on the trigger, something unexpected happened. A bright light suddenly flooded the parking lot, and a loud voice boomed through a megaphone. "Police, drop your weapons and get on the ground." 2 patrol cars had arrived simultaneously, their spotlights turning night into day. 4 officers emerged with their guns drawn, taking cover behind their vehicles. The attackers panicked. The leader fired wildly at the police cars before running toward the park. His 2 injured companions tried to follow, but one collapsed after a few steps, and the other was tackled by an officer before he reached the tree line. A fierce gun battle erupted as the leader tried to escape through the wooded area. Marcus could hear shouts and running footsteps, more gunshots, and eventually the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. Paramedics arrived within minutes and immediately went to work on Marcus's wounds. He had been shot twice, stabbed once, beaten with a tire iron, and cut by flying glass. The medical team counted 7 distinct injuries, any one of which could have been fatal. "We're losing him," one paramedic called out as they loaded Marcus onto a stretcher. His blood pressure was dropping fast, and his pulse was becoming irregular. "Get us to Phoenix General immediately. This guy needs surgery, now." As the ambulance raced through the city streets with sirens wailing, Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness. In his delirium, he kept thinking about the woman. Had she survived? Were her injuries serious? He had never even learned her name. The last thing Marcus remembered before the anesthesia took hold was a doctor's voice saying, "We've got a real fighter here. This man should have died in that parking lot. But somehow he's still with us." During the 6-hour surgery that followed, doctors removed 2 bullets, repaired internal bleeding, and stitched up the knife wound that had nearly severed the muscles in his shoulder. They also discovered that several pieces of shrapnel from his old war injury had been jarred loose during the beating, requiring additional surgery to remove. Marcus Thompson had survived, but barely. He would spend the next 3 weeks in intensive care, fighting for his life while his story spread through social media and news outlets across the country. The woman he had saved, Sarah Martinez, visited him every day once she was released from the hospital. She sat beside his bed reading newspapers aloud, telling him about the flood of support coming from strangers who had heard about his courage. But the biggest surprise was still to come. Someone had been paying very close attention to Marcus Thompson's story. Someone who understood the true meaning of sacrifice and brotherhood. Someone who never forgot a fellow Marine, especially one who had proven that the warrior spirit never dies. The knock on his hospital room door would change Marcus's life forever. Marcus was dozing fitfully in his hospital bed when he heard the distinctive sound of military boots marching in formation down the hallway. At first, he thought it was just another pain medication dream, but as the sounds grew louder and more precise, he realized this was real. The door to his room opened, and a figure in dress blue uniform stepped inside. The man was tall and lean, with silver hair and the kind of posture that could only come from decades of military service. On his chest were ribbons that Marcus recognized immediately: Purple Heart, Silver Star, Navy Cross. This was a warrior who had seen real combat. "Sergeant Thompson," the officer said in a crisp, authoritative voice. "I'm Colonel James Morrison, United States Marine Corps. Mind if I come in?" Marcus tried to sit up straighter in his bed, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. "Sir? Yes, sir. I mean, of course." "Colonel, sorry, I'm still pretty drugged up from the surgery." Colonel Morrison smiled and pulled a chair closer to the bed. "At ease, Marine. You've been through enough. I'm not here for a formal inspection." Behind the colonel, Marcus could see other uniformed figures gathering in the hallway. There had to be at least a dozen Marines out there, all in dress uniform, all standing at attention. "Sir, I don't understand," Marcus said, confusion evident in his voice. "What's going on? Why are you here?" The colonel's expression grew serious. "Marcus, do you remember what you swore when you took the Marine Corps oath? About protecting the innocent and defending those who cannot defend themselves?" "Yes, sir. Of course. Well, son, that oath doesn't end when you take off the uniform. What you did in that parking lot 3 weeks ago, that was the Marine Corps in action. That was everything we stand for." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. For 2 years since his discharge, he had felt lost and disconnected from the brotherhood he had known in the military. The transition to civilian life had been harder than he expected, and he often wondered if his service had really mattered. Colonel Morrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded American flag. This flag flew over Marine Corps Base Quantico for 30 days in your honor. Every Marine who served there during that time knew your story. They knew that one of their brothers had upheld the highest traditions of the Corps, even while injured and outnumbered. The colonel carefully unfolded the flag and placed it across Marcus's lap. But that's not all. The Marines in the hallway? They're here because they wanted to meet the man who reminded them why they serve. One by one, Marines filed into the room. Some were young recruits who had just finished basic training. Others were seasoned veterans with multiple deployments. A few were officers who had traveled hundreds of miles just to shake Marcus's hand. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a compact man with kind eyes, was the first to approach the bed. Sergeant Thompson, I served 2 tours in Iraq. I've seen brave men do incredible things under fire, but what you did in that parking lot, with your old injuries and no backup, that's the kind of courage legends are made of. Private First Class Williams, barely 19 years old, stepped forward next. Sir, I just finished boot camp last month. When our drill instructor told us your story, it made me understand what being a Marine really means. It's not about the uniform or the training. It's about what you do when nobody's watching, and everything is on the line. The stories continued for over an hour. Each Marine shared how Marcus's actions had affected them personally. Some talked about renewed pride in their service. Others spoke about inspiration to be better protectors of the innocent. Several mentioned that they had volunteered for additional training after hearing about the parking lot fight. But the biggest surprise came when Colonel Morrison motioned for everyone to step aside. Marcus, there's someone else here who wants to meet you. A young woman in a simple blue dress entered the room, walking carefully on crutches. It took Marcus a moment to recognize her. It was Sarah Martinez, the woman he had protected that night. But she wasn't alone. Behind her came an older man in a general's uniform, wearing stars on his shoulders. Sergeant Thompson, the general said. I'm General Patricia Hayes, Deputy Commandant for Programs and Resources. This is my daughter, Sarah. Marcus's mind reeled. The woman he had saved was the daughter of one of the highest-ranking officers in the Marine Corps. Sarah stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Thompson, I never got to thank you properly that night. I was so scared I could barely speak. But I need you to know that you saved my life, not just from those men, but in every way that matters. She pulled a letter from her purse. I wrote this while you were in surgery. I wanted you to know what your courage meant to me, and how it changed my life. Sarah began reading. Dear Marcus, I was walking to my car after studying late at the library when those men attacked me. I thought my life was over. Then this stranger appeared out of nowhere and put himself between me and danger. You took 7 different injuries protecting someone you had never met. You nearly died for me. I don't have words for that kind of selflessness. She paused, wiping her eyes. But here's what you need to know. Watching you fight for me, seeing how you never gave up even when you were bleeding and hurt, it changed something inside me. I decided that night that I wanted to spend my life helping people the way you helped me. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out an acceptance letter. I applied to nursing school the week after the attack. I start classes next month. I want to be there for people when they're hurt and scared, just like you were there for me. General Hayes stepped forward. Sergeant, the Marine Corps takes care of its own. Always. We heard that you've been struggling to find steady work since your discharge, partly because of your service-related injuries. The general handed Marcus an official-looking document. This is a letter of recommendation for a position with the Department of Veterans Affairs. They need someone with your experience to help other wounded veterans navigate the system and find the support they need. The pay is good, Colonel Morrison added. Full benefits, and the work involves helping other Marines who are going through what you went through after your discharge. Marcus looked around the room at all the faces watching him. For the first time in 2 years, he felt like he belonged somewhere again. The brotherhood he thought he had lost was still there, stronger than ever. There's one more thing, Sarah said softly. The 3 men who attacked us were all arrested because you fought back and delayed them long enough for the police to arrive. They were caught with evidence linking them to 6 other robberies. Your courage didn't just save me, It stopped them from hurting other innocent people. As the Marines began filing out of the room, each one stopped to shake Marcus's hand or pat his shoulder. The young private who had spoken earlier lingered for a moment. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "I just want you to know that every time I put on this uniform, I'm going to remember your story. When things get hard, when I'm scared or tired or want to quit, I'm going to think about what you did in that parking lot. You showed me what it really means to be a Marine." After everyone had left, Marcus sat alone with the flag on his lap and the job offer in his hands. Through his window, he could see the sun rising over Phoenix, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and red. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "Thank you for giving me my life back. I hope we can stay in touch as I start nursing school. The world needs more people like you." Marcus Thompson had spent 2 years feeling forgotten and useless, wondering if his military service had meant anything. Now he realized that being a Marine wasn't about the uniform or the rank or the medals. It was about the willingness to stand up when others couldn't, to protect the innocent, and to never abandon the fight for what's right. 6 months later, Marcus was helping other wounded veterans find their way back to civilian life. Sarah was excelling in her nursing program, volunteering at a crisis center in her spare time. And somewhere in a military prison, 3 men were serving lengthy sentences for assault and attempted murder. The story of the wounded veteran who took 7 hits protecting a stranger had become legend in Marine Corps training facilities across the country. But for Marcus Thompson, it was simply what any Marine would have done when someone needed help. The brotherhood never dies. It just waits for the moment when it's needed most.